At 2 o'clock in the morning, in a house with 41 rooms, a billionaire came down a staircase he rarely used and found his housekeeper asleep at the library table. In front of her lay an anatomy book, a stack of hospital bills, and a notebook filled edge to edge in a careful, tired hand. He woke her, and he asked her one question. Her answer would take his family apart, board by board, and build something better in its place. This is the story of Lily Carter and the 17-year-old boy she was trying to keep in this world. If you had driven the back roads of Litchfield County, Connecticut on a cold March night in that particular year, you would have passed a low stone wall that ran for the better part of a mile without ever showing you what it was guarding. Behind that wall stood Ashwood. It had been built in 1911 by a man who made his money in copper wire, and it had passed through 4 families before it came to the Blackwells. 41 rooms, a greenhouse with a glass roof that groaned in the wind, a drive so long that the mailman had given up on it years ago and left everything at the gatehouse instead. And in the east wing, up a short flight of stairs and behind a door of quarter-sawn oak, there was a library. 12,000 volumes, some of them worth more than a car. Most of them had not been opened in 30 years. Ethan Blackwell was 45 years old, and he had lived in that house for 11 of them. He was the chairman and majority owner of Blackwell Medical Systems, a company that made the small, quiet, extraordinary things that go into an operating room and are never seen again. Valve rings, catheter guides, imaging software, the tiny sensors that tell a surgeon what a heart is doing while it is being repaired. His products had been used, by conservative estimate, in over 2 million procedures. He had never once watched one of them being used. Ethan was not a cruel man. That is worth saying at the start, because it would be easier if he were. Cruel men are simple. Ethan was something more common and, in its own way, more dangerous. He was a man who had built his entire life at a distance from the thing he claimed to serve. He gave. He gave enormously. Every spring, the Blackwell Family Foundation held a gala in a hotel ballroom in Hartford, and every spring, men in dinner jackets and women in silk stood beneath a chandelier and applauded a photograph of a child who had been given a second chance at life. Every spring, Ethan wrote a check with a number on it that would have paid off the mortgages of everyone in the room. And every spring he went home to a house where a woman named Lily Carter was quietly starving herself of sleep on the floor below him, and he did not know it. He would find out on a Tuesday night in March. And after that, nothing in his life would sit in the same place again. Lily Carter was 32 years old. She was born in New Britain, Connecticut, in a third-floor walk-up on Arch Street with a radiator that knocked all winter, and she grew up there, and at 32 she still lived in the very same apartment. The rent had gone up 11 times. The radiator still knocked. Her mother, Dolores Carter, had worked the overnight shift at a nursing home for 26 years. Her father, Ray Carter, had driven a delivery route for a food supplier and could tell you the exact location of every decent diner between Waterbury and Providence. They were not wealthy people. They were not, by any measure the world uses, important people. But they had raised their daughter to believe 2 things without exception: that you finished what you started, and that you did not walk past someone who needed help. Lily had believed both, and in the end, one of them cost her the other. When she was 22 years old and 3 months from finishing her nursing degree, her parents drove out on a February evening to pick up a birthday cake for their son. There was ice on Route 72. There had been ice there for a week. They did not come home. Lily was in the middle of her final clinical rotation. She had a stethoscope in her bag and a job offer waiting at a hospital in Hartford, and she had already picked out the shoes she was going to wear on her first day, because she was 22 and that is the kind of thing you think about. And on the other side of that week, there was a 7-year-old boy named Jaden who had nobody left in the world but her. The state offered her options: extended family in Georgia, a placement program. A caseworker with kind eyes explained, gently, that many young women in her position chose to finish their education first, and that this was a reasonable choice, and that nobody would think less of her. Lily sat in that office and listened to all of it. Then she asked one question. If I finish school, where does he sleep for 2 years? The caseworker did not have an answer that Lily could live with. So she withdrew from the program, Not deferred, withdrew, because deferring cost money she did not have. She took the first job that would take her, and then a second one on the weekends, and she raised her brother in the apartment on Arch Street with the radiator that knocked. She packed his lunches. She learned to braid, badly, then well. She sat in a folding chair at every middle school band concert he ever played in and clapped louder than anyone, and she never once told him what it had cost her, because she had decided early that he would not grow up carrying that weight. For 10 years, that was the whole shape of her life, and for 10 years it worked. Then Jaden turned 16, and he started getting tired on the stairs. It began as nothing. He was tired after basketball practice. Every boy is tired after basketball practice. He got winded going up to the 3rd floor. Every boy who has grown 5 inches in a year gets winded. Then, in October, he sat down on the 2nd floor landing and did not get up for 4 minutes, and when Lily found him there, his lips had a color she had seen once, years before, on a cardiac floor during a clinical rotation, and had never forgotten. They spent 11 hours in an emergency department that night. They spent 4 months after that in the machinery of American medicine, the referral, the echocardiogram, the second echocardiogram, the stress test, the cardiac MRI, the waiting room with the aquarium, the parking garage where the ticket cost more than lunch. And in February, in a small office on the 4th floor of Mercy Northside Hospital, a cardiologist named Dr. Alan Pruitt turned a monitor toward them and explained that Jaden Carter had a rare form of thickened heart muscle that was obstructing the flow of blood out of his heart, and that it was progressing faster than anyone would like. He used a great many words. Lily wrote down every one of them. Then he said the words that mattered. Eventually, this is going to need to be corrected surgically. Open procedure. It's a significant operation. And then, because he was an honest man in a system that does not reward honesty, he added, "I'd like to move on this in the next several months, not years." Lily asked what it would cost. Dr. Pruitt said that was not really his department. It turned out to be a department on the 1st floor, behind a counter, staffed by a woman who was neither unkind nor unhurried, and who produced a number. The insurance Lily carried through her employer would cover a portion of it, a meaningful portion. She was, by the standards of the country she lived in, one of the lucky ones. The portion that remained, the deductible, the co-insurance, the out-of-network anesthesiology group that nobody could explain to her, the surgical center facility fee, the 8 weeks of recovery during which she would not be able to work 2 jobs or possibly 1, came to a figure that she carried in her head for the rest of that year, like a stone in a coat pocket. She had $4,100 in savings. She had been building it for 11 years. She applied for a personal loan and was declined. She applied for a second and was approved at a rate that would have taken her 14 years to pay down. She applied to 3 assistance programs and was told, in 3 different fonts, that her household income was $2,000 above the threshold. $2,000 a year, the amount she had earned, precisely, by taking the second job so that her brother could have a laptop for school. She sat in her car in a parking garage in Hartford, and she did not cry, because she had trained herself out of that a long time ago. She simply sat there with her hands on the wheel until the attendant knocked on the window to ask if she was all right. Then she drove home, made dinner, helped Jaden with his history paper on the Marshall Plan, and told him that everything was being handled. That was the first lie she ever told her brother. She would tell many more before it was over, and every one of them would be a version of that same one. Lily had worked at Ashwood for 2 years and 4 months. She had gotten the position through an agency in Hartford that supplied domestic staff to the estates in the Northwest Hills. The agency's placement coordinator had looked at her file. Nursing school incomplete, 10 years of assorted service work, excellent references, no criminal record, and had said, not unkindly, "You're overqualified for this, and underqualified for what you actually want." That's the worst place to be. The head of household at Ashwood was a woman named Dorothy Ainsley, 68 years old, who had worked in that house since the Blackwells bought it, and had opinions about every square foot of it. Everyone called her Dot. Dot had hired exactly 400 people in her life, and had a reputation for knowing within 90 seconds whether someone would last. She watched Lily Carter fold a fitted sheet in the linen room, in silence, and then said, "Monday, 7 o'clock. Wear shoes you can stand in." Lily's hours were 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, with alternating Saturdays. She was responsible for the East Wing, the main stair, the 2 guest suites, the morning room, and the library. She was paid better than she had been paid anywhere else in her life. It was still not enough. So she picked up a shift at a warehouse fulfillment center off Route 6 on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings, from 6 to 11. And on the nights she did not have the warehouse, she stayed at Ashwood. That last part was not in her contract, and it is the part that matters. Here is how it started. In her second month at the house, Lily was dusting the third bay of the library, the tall shelves along the north wall, behind the reading table, and she found a run of 40 or 50 volumes, bound in dark green cloth, that had clearly not been touched since before she was born. They were medical texts, a cardiology reference from the 1980s, 3 volumes of anatomy, a surgical atlas so heavy she had to use both hands, a collection of case studies from a Boston teaching hospital. The old man who had owned the house before the Blackwells had been a physician, and when the estate sold, his library had stayed with the walls, as libraries in houses like that often do. Lily stood on the third rung of the ladder with a dust cloth in her hand and read half a page on the mitral valve, and something in her chest, long boarded up, quietly came loose. She put the book back. She finished her shift. She went home. 4 months later, when Dr. Pruitt turned that monitor toward her and started using words, she remembered that shelf. And after that, on the nights she did not have the warehouse, she stayed. She told Dot the truth about it, because Lily did not lie to people who had been decent to her. She said she wanted to use the library after hours, that she would touch nothing else, that she would lock up behind herself, and that if Dot said no, she would never mention it again. But Ainsley looked at her for a long moment. "The lamps on the reading table are original," she said. "Don't put a mug on the wood." That was all. That was the whole permission. And so for 8 months, 3 or 4 nights a week, a housekeeper sat alone in a room full of books that belonged to a man she had spoken to 11 times, and taught herself things she had once been 3 months away from being taught properly. You should understand what she was actually doing, because it was not what people assumed when they heard the story later. Lily Carter was not trying to become a doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was not trying to cure her brother. She had no illusions on that score, and it insulted her when people suggested it. She had a much smaller, much harder ambition. She wanted to be able to keep up, because here is what she had learned in those 4 months of appointments. A doctor gives you 11 minutes, sometimes 14. In those minutes, that doctor will say approximately 40 things, of which you will retain 6, and of those 6 you will misunderstand 2. And then you will walk out into a hallway with a folder in your hand and a decision to make about the only person you have left in the world. And if you are the kind of family that can afford to, you will go home and call a friend who is a physician, or a cousin who is a nurse, or a colleague from the club whose brother-in-law runs a cardiac program in Boston, and that person will translate for you. That is what money actually buys in medicine. Not better doctors, translators, advocates, someone in the room who knows which question to ask. Lily had nobody, so she decided to become that person herself. The notebook was a black hardcover composition book, the kind that cost $2 at a drugstore. By March, it was her 3rd one. In it, she wrote the name of every medication Jaden had been prescribed, its class, its purpose, its common effects, the numbers off every report, the measurements of the chamber walls, the pressure gradients, the ejection fraction, in a column, by date, so that she could see the direction they were moving. Every question she had thought of at 11 at night and would not be able to remember at the appointment 3 weeks later. Every term Dr. Pruitt had used that she'd had to look up. And on the inside cover, in block capitals, she had written 4 words for herself. Ask. Don't assume. Write it down. She was not chasing a miracle. She was building a defense against being the woman in the hallway who did not know what she had just agreed to. That is what Ethan Blackwell walked in on. He simply did not know it yet. It was the 11th of March, and Ethan Blackwell could not sleep. He had a board call at 7 with an investor group in Zurich, and a headache that had started behind his right eye at 4 in the afternoon and had not gone anywhere since. Sometime after 1:30 he gave up, put on a sweater, and went downstairs for the one thing in the house that had ever reliably worked on him, a specific armchair in the library, by the north window, where he had read himself back to sleep perhaps 200 times. He came down the east stair without turning on the hall lights, because he knew the house, and he saw a lamp on under the library door. His first thought was that Dot had left it burning. His second thought, arriving a half-second later, was that in 11 years, Dot Ainsley had never left a lamp burning. He pushed the door open. The reading table was 13 feet of English oak, and at the far end of it, in the pool of one lamp, a woman was asleep with her head on her forearm. He knew her. Of course he knew her. She had worked in his house for 2 years. He knew her, the way you know a person you have said good morning to 200 times and never once asked a question of. He knew that her name was Lily. He was not, in that first instant, certain of her last name. Then he saw what was on the table, and he stopped where he stood. An anatomy atlas, open, held flat with a coaster. Beside it a cardiology reference from the shelf behind her, bristling with torn strips of paper as bookmarks. Beside that, a stack of envelopes and folded statements. He recognized the layout of a hospital billing statement instantly, because his company sold to the institutions that generated them. And in the center, under her hand, a black composition notebook, open, covered from margin to margin, in small, disciplined handwriting, and propped against the base of the lamp, where she could see it while she worked, a photograph. A boy in a hospital bed, maybe 16, a basketball jersey over the gown, which meant somebody had let him wear it, which meant a nurse somewhere had been kind. He was giving the camera a thumbs up, and a grin that was 90% bravado and 10% terror. Ethan Blackwell stood in the doorway of his own library for the better part of a minute, and he could not have told you why he did not simply back out and go upstairs. Then Lily stirred and lifted her head and saw him. What happened in her face was the thing he would remember for the rest of his life. It was not embarrassment, it was calculation, fast, practiced, almost invisible. In under a second, a woman who had just woken up ran the numbers on losing her job. She stood up so quickly, the chair legs cried against the floor. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm sorry." She was already closing the folder, already gathering the statements, already sliding the notebook shut. "I'll leave everything the way I found it. I'll be out in 2 minutes." "Lily." Mrs. Ainsley knew I was using the room. "That's on me, not on her. I asked her and she said yes, and if that was the wrong thing for her to say, it's still my fault, because I'm the one who asked." "Lily, stop." She stopped. She stood very straight, with the folder against her chest, and waited to be fired. Ethan came into the room. He looked at the table, at the atlas, at the bills, at the notebook, and then he asked the question. The only question he had, and the one he would later admit he had asked badly. "Why are you studying medicine in my library at 2 o'clock in the morning?" "I'm not studying medicine, sir." "Then what is this?" And Lily Carter, who had been awake for 19 hours and had exactly nothing left in the tank with which to construct a polite version, said, "It's homework." Ethan looked at the photograph propped against the lamp. "Who is the boy?" She did not answer right away. He watched her decide whether to. "That's Jaden, my brother. He's 17. Is he sick?" "He has a heart condition," she said it flatly, the way you say a thing you have said out loud 400 times. "It's rare. It's getting worse. He's going to need an operation." "And the studying?" Lily looked down at the notebook in her hands. "He thinks I'm doing this to go back to school," she said. "That's what I told him. He's proud of me for it. He tells his friends his sister's going back for her nursing degree." She raised her eyes. "I'm not going back to school, Mr. Blackwell. I'm trying to understand what's taking him, because when I sit in that office, they talk for 11 minutes and then they ask if I have any questions, and I have to have the right ones ready, or I don't get another shot at it for 3 weeks. Nobody's coming to explain it to me twice." The house was very quiet. Ethan said, "Then get a better doctor." He would spend a considerable amount of the following year regretting the way he said that. Not the sentiment, the way he said it, lightly. The way a man says the obvious thing to someone who has clearly overlooked it. Lily Carter smiled. It was a small, tired, courteous smile, with absolutely nothing behind it. "Poor people find good doctors all the time, sir," she said. "We just can't afford to keep them." Ethan Blackwell did not sleep at all that night. He went back upstairs at 3:10, and he sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, and he thought about a sentence. "We just can't afford to keep them." At 7 o'clock he took his call with Zurich. At 9 he was in the car to the office in Farmington, and at 10:15 he did something he had not done in the entire 11-year history of Blackwell Medical Systems. He asked his head of human resources to bring him the company's own health plan. Not the summary. Not the benefits brochure with the photograph of a family on a bicycle path. The actual plan documents, the deductibles, the co-insurance tiers, the out-of-pocket maximums for each of the 4 employee levels. He read all of it. It took him 3 hours, and he was a man who read contracts for a living. Then he asked a second question. What does a person at pay band 2 actually take home? And what would a cardiac procedure at a facility using our own equipment cost them out of pocket? The number came back at 440 that afternoon. Ethan Blackwell sat at a desk on the top floor of a building with his name on it and looked at a figure representing what one of his own assembly technicians, a woman who spent 8 hours a day building the sensor arrays that go into a cardiac catheterization lab, would have to pay to be treated by the very technology her hands had made. It was more than she earned in a year and a half. He had signed off on that plan. Twice. Both times in a meeting that lasted under 20 minutes. On the recommendation of a consultant who had used the phrase, "market competitive," 9 times. That evening he did not go to the club. He drove home, and he walked through his own house, and he saw it for the first time. He saw that the woman who cleaned the east wing had a small callus on the outside edge of her right hand, in the place where you get one from lifting. He saw that she ate her lunch standing at the counter in the service kitchen in 7 minutes, and that on Tuesdays and Thursdays she did not eat lunch at all, because she left at 4 and had to be somewhere at 6. He asked Ainsley, casually, how long Lily had been at the house. 2 years and 4 months, said, without pausing in what she was doing. Never late, never called out, not once. Does she seem all right to you? Ainsley set down the tray she was holding and turned around and gave her employer a look that he would describe, years later, as the most expensive thing anyone had ever given him for free. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, "that woman is running on 3 hours a night, and she has been for the better part of a year. I've watched her go gray. Everybody in this house knows it." She picked the tray back up. "You're the only one who didn't." He found her on Thursday, in the morning room, changing the water in the flowers. He had rehearsed it. He was a man who had negotiated the acquisition of 11 companies, and he had rehearsed a conversation with a housekeeper the way he would have rehearsed a term sheet, and he still got it wrong. "Lily, I've made some inquiries. There's a pediatric cardiac program at a hospital in Boston that my company has a long relationship with. I've spoken to the chief of surgery there. If we move your brother's case to them, I'll cover it. All of it. The procedure, the facility, the recovery, whatever's left over from the insurance. It's done. It's handled. You don't have to think about it again." He waited to see relief. Lily Carter set down the pitcher, very carefully, on the tray, and not on the wood. "Thank you," she said. "No." Ethan actually laughed. One short, disbelieving breath. "I'm sorry?" "I said no, sir." "Lily, do you understand what I'm offering you?" "I understand it exactly." She turned around and faced him, and there was nothing deferential left in her posture at all. "You're offering to pay for my brother's operation." "Yes. And in 6 months, or a year, or 3 years, when something goes wrong between you and me, when I break something, or I say the wrong thing to your mother, or you simply get tired of the arrangement, what happens then?" "Nothing happens. It isn't conditional." "Everything is conditional when only one person is holding it." She said it without heat, That was what made it land. Mr. Blackwell, I have spent 10 years making sure that boy never once had to feel like a charity case. He has a scholarship to a state school waiting for him, if his heart holds. He's got a job lined up at a garage this summer. He's got plans. Her voice did not rise. It got quieter, which was worse. I am not going to have him live the rest of his life knowing he's only breathing because a rich man felt sorry for us. He'd carry that. He'd carry it forever. I know, because I've been carrying something for 10 years, and it's heavier than it looks. Ethan stood in the morning room and had, perhaps, the first genuinely humbling experience of his adult life. All right, he said at last. Then tell me what you do want. And this is the part of the story that people always get wrong when they retell it. They assume she asked for money in some more dignified form. She did not. Lily had thought about this. She had thought about it for 8 months in a library at 2 in the morning, and she had her answer ready, and it came out in 3 parts. First, I want a real second opinion, not a phone call, a full independent panel, cardiologists and a surgeon who don't work for the hospital that made the first recommendation and don't work for you either. I want them to look at every scan and every report from the beginning, and I want them to tell me whether an open operation is actually the only road. Done. Second, I want to be in the room, not the waiting room. In the room, when they discuss him. And I want my notes on the table. Ethan hesitated for exactly 1 second, and to his enormous credit, he did not ask why. Done? Third, she picked the pitcher back up, and her hands were not entirely steady now. I want to finish my degree. I've got 3 months of coursework and a clinical placement left. I withdrew 10 years ago, so I'd have to reapply and redo some of it. I've priced it out. It's not nothing, but it's not what you were about to spend either. She looked at him. I'd want it as a loan, written down. With a rate and a schedule, I'll pay every dollar of it back. Lily? A loan, she said. That's the offer. Take it or don't. Ethan Blackwell had built a fortune reading people across tables. I'll have it drawn up Monday, he said. Margaret Blackwell was 71 years old, and she had built something too, though nobody ever put it that way. She had been married at 23 to a man who made a great deal of money and very little conversation. She had raised a son largely alone in a house with staff. And when her husband died, she had taken the family's scattered, disorganized giving and turned it into the Blackwell Family Foundation, which she had chaired for 19 years, and which by the year of this story dispersed roughly $14 million annually to pediatric cardiac causes. She had also, over those 19 years, quietly come to believe something that she would never have said aloud in that form, that the family's reputation and the family's good works were the same object. Margaret came up from Palm Beach in the last week of March, as she did every year, 6 weeks before the gala. She noticed things. She had always noticed things. It was her single greatest gift, and her single greatest liability. She noticed that her son asked, in passing, about the housekeeper's schedule. She noticed a legal folder on his desk with a name on the tab that was not a corporate name. She noticed, walking past the library on the second night of her stay, that the door was open and that the housekeeper was sitting at the reading table with medical books in front of her, and that her son was standing at the window with a cup of coffee, talking to her. Not giving instructions. Talking. Margaret Blackwell went upstairs and did not sleep well either. She found Lily 2 days later, in the upstairs hall, and she did it the way women of her generation and station had been trained to do it, with perfect courtesy and a knife. Miss Carter, may I have a moment? Of course, ma'am. I understand my son has taken an interest in your family's situation. Mr. Blackwell has been generous with his time. Yes, he is generous. Margaret folded her hands. Miss Carter, I have chaired a charitable foundation for 19 years. Do you know what that means in practice? It means that I have read 6,000 applications. 6,000. Every one of them is a true story about a child who is genuinely ill. And every one of them, without exception, is also a request. I haven't asked your son for anything, ma'am. No, Margaret agreed. That's what makes you effective. Lily said nothing. People like you always have a sad story, Miss Carter. Margaret's voice never rose above the pitch you would use to discuss the weather, and people like my son always end up paying for it. Lily Carter stood in that hallway, holding a stack of clean linens. "Mrs. Blackwell," she said, "I've cleaned this floor 200 times, and you've never once said good morning to me. So you'll forgive me if I don't take your reading of my character too personally." She went back to work. Margaret Blackwell stood in the hall for some time after she had gone, and then she made a telephone call. The firm Margaret used was in Stamford, and they were good, and they were fast. What they brought back, 9 days later, was 3 pages long, and 2.5 of those pages were unremarkable. Lily Carter had no criminal record. She had no bankruptcies. She had 2 civil matters, both of them medical collections, both of them settled at $11 and $19 a month respectively. It was the 3rd page. 4 years earlier, in October, Lily Carter had signed a short-term loan agreement with a lending office in New Britain for $6,200. The account was in the name of Jaden R. Carter. Jaden R. Carter had been 13 years old. Margaret read it twice and felt the particular electricity of a person who believes she has just been proven right. Here is what actually happened on the night that piece of paper came from. That October, Jaden had come down with an infection that turned overnight into something that put him in an emergency department at 2 in the morning with a fever of 105. He was admitted, he was there 9 days, he came home fine, and he grew 4 inches the following year, and he has almost no memory of it. The hospital required a deposit before the transfer to the pediatric unit. It was a policy on a laminated card. The woman at the desk was apologetic and had no discretion whatsoever. Lily had $1,100. She went to a lending office at 8 the next morning. She was declined, because her income was already committed and her credit was thin. And the man behind the counter, and there is no version of this story in which that man is not partly responsible, looked at her paperwork and said, "You know, if the account's opened in the patient's name, the underwriting's different. The system reads it as a medical account, just needs a co-signer." Lily Carter asked him, twice, if that was allowed. He said, "People do it all the time." She signed her brother's name at 8:40 in the morning, after 11 hours in a hospital chair, and she signed her own beneath it as co-signer, and she paid that loan off in full over 19 months, at a rate she still would not say out loud. She never told Jaden. She never told anyone. It was the single worst thing she had ever done, and she had done it at a counter in a strip mall, while a boy upstairs across town was waiting to be moved to a different floor. Margaret Blackwell held that page, and did not see any of that. She saw a woman who had put a minor's name on a debt. She had Lily brought to the study on a Friday afternoon. She slid the page across the desk. "Do you know what this is?" Lily looked at it. Her face did something complicated, and then it went very still. "Yes, ma'am." "Then you'll know it's a criminal matter. Financial identity misuse involving a minor. In this state, that isn't a small thing. I know exactly what it is." "I'm sure you do." Margaret laced her fingers. "Miss Carter, I'm going to be extremely straightforward with you, because I think you're intelligent enough to appreciate it. My son has arranged an independent medical review for your brother, through my foundation's network, incidentally, whether he realizes that or not. That review is scheduled for the 14th. Lily said nothing. "I want you out of this house before then. Resign. Give notice. Take a reference. I'll write you a very good one. And go. If you do that, this page goes into a drawer and stays there. And if I don't? Then I hand it to my attorney, and I make one phone call to the review coordinator, and your brother's file goes to the bottom of a very long list." Margaret said this without any visible pleasure. That was the terrible part. She genuinely believed she was protecting her son from a confidence trick, and she had reached an age and a position where the difference between protecting your family and destroying someone else's had become, to her, a matter of paperwork. Lily Carter looked at the page on the desk for a long moment. Then she said something that Margaret Blackwell would think about for the rest of her life. "Ma'am, do you want to know why I signed it? I don't think the reason changes the document." "No," Lily said. "I don't suppose you do." She stood up and left the room. On the morning of April the 12th, 2 days before the review, Lily Carter left an envelope on Dot Ainsley's desk in the service office and did not come to work. The letter inside was 4 sentences long. It gave notice, effective immediately. It apologized for the lack of warning. It thanked Mrs. Ainsley for the use of the library. It did not give a reason. Dot read it twice, and then she did something that was well outside her job description. She went upstairs and knocked on the door of the study where Ethan Blackwell was on a call, and she opened it without waiting. Ethan looked up. "Dot, I'm—" "Get off the phone," said Dorothy Ainsley. He got off the phone. He had never been to New Britain. That is a sentence worth sitting with. He had lived 31 miles from that city for 11 years, and he had employed people from it, and sold to a hospital in it, and he had never been there. The building on Arch Street was brick, 4 stories, with a fire escape down the front, and a door that did not lock properly. Somebody had planted marigolds in a coffee can on the second landing. The radiator on the 3rd floor was knocking. Lily opened the door with a box in her hands. They looked at each other. "You should go," she said. "Where are you going?" "My mother's cousin has a place in Georgia. She's had a room open for 4 years. "Lily, the review is Thursday." "I know when the review is." "Then what in God's name are you doing?" And Lily Carter, who had held it together in a hospital billing office, in a parking garage, in a hallway with a stack of clean linens, and in a study with a page on the desk in front of her, finally, at her own front door, did not. "She has a paper with my brother's name on it," she said, "from when he was 13. From a night I'm not going to explain to you standing in a hallway. And she says if I'm still in that house on Thursday, she makes a phone call and Jaden goes to the bottom of the list." Ethan Blackwell went very quiet. "My mother said that to you?" "Yes." "When?" "Friday." He looked past her, into the apartment. He saw a boy's sneakers by the door, size 14. He saw a kitchen table with a laptop on it, and a college brochure. He saw 2 boxes taped shut, and a 3rd one open. "Where is Jaden right now?" "School. He doesn't know. He thinks we're moving because I got a better job." Ethan nodded slowly. "Unpack the boxes," he said. "Mr. Blackwell." "Ethan, I can't unpack the boxes. You don't understand what she's holding." "I understand precisely what she's holding." He was already turning toward the stairs, and something in his voice had changed in a way she had not heard before. "It's a piece of paper about the worst night of your life, and she's using it as a lever. I've watched people do that in business for 20 years, and I've never once seen it done in my own family." He stopped on the landing. "The gala is Saturday," he said. "Come or don't come, but unpack the boxes." The Blackwell Family Foundation Spring Benefit was held that year, as it had been for 19 years, in the grand ballroom of a hotel in downtown Hartford. 412 guests, 11 tables of 10 in the center, the rest in the wings, a silent auction along the north wall, a string quartet from the university, and above the dais, on a screen 20 feet wide, a slideshow of children. Margaret Blackwell took the podium at 9:15. She was, it must be said, magnificent at this. She had been doing it for 19 years, and she had never once used a note card. She spoke about a girl from Waterbury named Amelia, who had been given a valve repair at 4 years old, and who was now, at 11, on a swim team. She spoke about the 81 children the foundation had assisted in the past year, and she came, as she always did, to the line that closed the speech and opened the checkbooks. "Because in this country," said Margaret Blackwell, "no child's life should ever depend on the size of a family's bank account. Every child deserves to be treated." 400 people applauded. And from the second table on the left, Ethan Blackwell stood up. He did not shout. He walked to the steps at the side of the dais, and the room quieted the way rooms do when they sense that something unscheduled is happening. And he took the 3 steps up, and Margaret, who had never in her life been interrupted at that podium, stepped back with a small, tight smile and made room for her son. Ethan adjusted the microphone. "Every child deserves to be treated," he said. "Mother, I want to ask you a question about that, in front of these people, because I've spent 11 years asking it in private and never getting an answer." The smile on Margaret's face did not move. "Does that include a child whose sister works in our house?" Nobody moved. 412 people did not move. "Her name is Lily Carter," Ethan said. "She's cleaned the east wing of Ashwood for 2 years and 4 months. She has never been late and she has never called out. Her brother is 17 years old and he has the exact condition that 7 of the 81 children we celebrated tonight have. He looked out at the room. I want to tell you 3 things, and then I'll get off this stage and you can go back to your dessert. The first is about my company. Blackwell Medical Systems employs 1,100 people. This week I read our own health plan for the first time in 11 years. A woman on our assembly floor who builds the sensor arrays that go into a catheterization lab would pay more out of her own pocket for that procedure than she earns in 18 months. We build the equipment that saves these children, and we have priced our own people out of standing in front of it. I approved that plan, twice, in meetings that took 20 minutes. Somewhere in the back, a chair scraped. The second is about this foundation. I asked for the selection criteria on Wednesday. Not the published criteria, the working notes. And what I found is that when 2 applications are medically comparable, the tiebreaker is something we've been calling story strength. That means, which child will photograph better on that screen behind me? Which family will come to this dinner? Which case will get us written up in a magazine? He let that sit for a moment. Amelia is real. Every one of those 81 children is real, and I'm proud of every dollar. But there is a second list. There are children we passed over because they weren't a good story, and I have never had the decency to ask how long that list is. Margaret Blackwell said, very quietly, off the microphone, "Ethan, that's enough." "The third thing," Ethan said, "is about my mother." The quartet had stopped playing some time ago. 9 days ago, my mother had Lily Carter investigated. She found a 4-year-old loan document from the night Lily's brother went into an emergency room with a fever of 105 and the hospital wanted a deposit before they'd move him upstairs. A woman with $1,100 in her account did something at a lending counter at 8 in the morning that she has been ashamed of ever since, and she paid every cent of it back. My mother took that page and she used it to tell a 32-year-old woman that if she did not resign and disappear before Thursday, her brother's medical review would be buried. He turned to look at her. That's what happened, isn't it? Margaret Blackwell stood on the dais in front of 412 people. She had spent 19 years building the thing they were all standing in. She said, "I was protecting this family." "I know you were," Ethan said. "That's what frightens me." He turned back to the microphone. "Effective tonight, I'm stepping off the board of this foundation, and so is my mother. And neither of us returns until an outside firm has audited every selection decision made in the last 10 years and published what they find. Every dollar I've pledged stands." The gala continues. The music will start again in a minute and the bar is open. But I'd ask you all to do one thing before you leave this room. He looked out at the tables. Every one of you employs people. Go home and read your own health plan. Not the brochure, the plan. Find out what it actually costs the people who work for you to use the thing you're all here celebrating tonight. I found out on Tuesday. I'm 45 years old. It took me a woman falling asleep in my library at 2 in the morning to make me look. He stepped down off the dais and walked out through the service corridor, and he did not stop to speak to anyone. Lily Carter was not in that room. She was 31 miles away, at a kitchen table on Arch Street, quizzing her brother on the Marshall Plan for a test he had on Monday. She heard about it the next morning, the way everyone else did. There is a version of this story where that speech fixes everything, and I am not going to tell you that version, because it is not true and you would not believe it anyway. Here is what actually happened in the 8 days after. 2 board members of the Blackwell Family Foundation resigned in protest, of Ethan, not of Margaret. 3 major donors withdrew pledges totaling $4 million. A columnist in a Hartford paper wrote a piece, calling the whole performance an act of self-congratulation by a man who could afford it, and there were people who agreed with her, and some of what she wrote was fair. Blackwell Medical Systems' share price fell 11% in 4 days. An anonymous letter went to the state's attorney's office containing a photocopy of a 4-year-old loan document. It was reviewed by an assistant prosecutor named Danielle Okoro, who read the file, read the repayment history, made 2 phone calls, one of them to a lending office in New Britain that had been cited twice in the intervening years for exactly this practice, and declined to open a matter. Her note in the file was 1 line long. Complainant's interest appears to be other than public. And Margaret Blackwell went back to Palm Beach, and she did not speak to her son for 4 months. Here is what it bought. The audit happened. It took 14 months, and it was published in full, and it found that the foundation had, over a decade, systematically favored applications with what the working notes called narrative value, and that the effect had fallen hardest on families who could not attend events, could not take a day off to be photographed, and did not know how to write an appeal. The foundation rebuilt its selection process from the ground up. Blind medical review first, financial needs second. Everything else, never. And in June, Blackwell Medical Systems announced a restructured employee health plan with a cardiac and oncology carve-out that eliminated the co-insurance tier entirely. It cost the company $9 million a year. The board approved it in a meeting that lasted, Ethan noted afterward with something close to bitterness, 20 minutes. The independent panel convened on the 28th of April, rescheduled, in a conference room at a cardiac center in Boston. There were 4 physicians present. Dr. Evelyn Reyes, a cardiologist in her 50s who had spent 22 years reading images of thickened heart muscle. A surgeon named Dr. Wendell Sharp, an imaging specialist, and a fellow, 3 years in, who took the minutes. Dr. Pruitt joined by video from Hartford, and to his credit he joined willingly, and he had sent everything. And at the end of the table, in a chair she had asked for and been given, sat a housekeeper in her only good blazer, with 3 black composition notebooks in front of her. They went through it for 2 hours, scan by scan, measurement by measurement. The surgical recommendation was reasonable. It was, everyone agreed, the standard road. And then, at the point in the meeting where it would ordinarily have ended, Dr. Reyes said, "Miss Carter, you've been writing for 2 hours. What's in the books?" Lily said, "Numbers, mostly, and questions." "May I?" Lily slid the 3rd notebook down the table. Dr. Evelyn Reyes opened it, and she went very quiet, and she turned about 11 pages, and then she went back 4. What she was looking at was a column, 16 months of it, every measurement off every report Jaden had ever had, in date order, in a housekeeper's handwriting, and beside each entry, in a narrower second column, something no clinical file contained. Nov 3, stairs, 2 flights, fine. Nov 19, stairs, tired, recovered in 1 minute. Dex 2 Nover known, good day, played 40 minute. Deck 14, bad. Jan 8, bad in morning, fine by afternoon. Jan 9, same. Ask about this. 16 months of a boy's actual life, kept by the only person who had watched all of it. Dr. Reyes said, "Miss Carter, these entries in January. He was worse in the mornings and better by the afternoon. Consistently?" "Yes, ma'am. For about 6 weeks. Then it stopped and I stopped writing it. I asked about it at the February appointment, but we ran out of time." Dr. Reyes turned the notebook around and pushed it toward the imaging specialist, and something in the room changed temperature. "I am not going to pretend to you that a housekeeper diagnosed a heart condition, because she did not, and she would be the first person to tell you so. What happened was this. The obstruction in Jaden Carter's heart had been assumed, reasonably, to be fixed, a permanent narrowing caused by the thickened muscle wall, which would require the surgeon to go in and remove tissue. That is what the images showed, in the moments the images were taken. But the images had all been taken in the middle of the day, at rest, in a quiet room. Lily's 16 months of marginal notes described something the scans had never once caught, a pattern that varied with the time of day, with hydration, with the state the boy was in when he woke up. It suggested that a significant part of the obstruction was dynamic, that it came and went, and that a portion of what was being blamed on the muscle wall might be caused by something else entirely. They ran 2 additional studies over the following 9 days, one of them deliberately at 7 o'clock in the morning, which no one had ever done. And they found it, an anomalous attachment of the tissue that anchors the mitral valve, a variant present since birth, small, easy to miss, and sitting in exactly the wrong place. Under certain conditions, it was being drawn into the outflow and closing the door. The muscle was thick. That was real. But it was not the whole story, and it was not, on its own, the thing that was going to take him. Dr. Sharp put it plainly at the follow-up. The operation we were planning is a good operation, and I've done 400 of them. But for this boy, it's more than he needs. There's a targeted approach here, smaller, catheter-based for one component, a limited repair for the other, shorter time under, days in the hospital instead of weeks, and a considerably better long-term picture, because we'd be leaving healthy tissue where it is. He looked down the table at Lily Carter. We would not have gone looking for this, he said. Nothing in the file pointed here. Your notebook pointed here. Lily Carter, who had held it together through all of it, put both hands flat on the table and did not say anything at all for some time. I don't want anybody saying I found something, she said finally. I'm not a doctor. I wrote down what I saw because I was scared I'd forget it. Ms. Carter, said Dr. Reyes, that is the entire job. The procedure was done on the 6th of June. It took 4 hours and 10 minutes. Jaden Carter was 17 years and 8 months old, and the last thing he said before they took him back was, Lil, if I don't make it, you can have the Xbox. You're not funny. I'm a little funny. You're a little funny, she agreed, and she held on to his hand for 1 second longer than she meant to, and then they took him. Lily sat in a waiting room on the 4th floor with a black composition notebook in her lap that she did not open. At some point in the 2nd hour, a man sat down 2 chairs away with 2 cups of coffee and offered her one and did not say anything. They sat there together for 2 hours and 40 minutes without speaking. At 6 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, Dr. Sharp came out in his scrub cap with the small, specific expression that surgeons wear when it has gone the way they wanted, and Lily Carter was on her feet before he had crossed half the room. He's fine, said Dr. Sharp. He did beautifully. Jaden went home on the 10th of June. He was back at the garage, on light duty, in July, and he started at the State University at Storrs in late August, and he made the intramural basketball team as a sophomore, which he mentions more often than the surgery. Margaret Blackwell came back north in October. She did not come to the house. She asked, through a letter, whether Lily Carter would meet her, and she named a diner on the Berlin Turnpike, rather than any place she would have chosen for herself, and Lily thought about it for 4 days, and then said yes. They sat in a booth. Margaret Blackwell, 71, in a cashmere coat, drinking bad coffee. I have prepared several versions of this, she said. None of them are any good, so I'm going to do it badly. What I did to you was indefensible, and I knew it at the time. I have told myself for 19 years that I was a woman who helped sick children. It has been a very difficult summer. Lily turned her cup a quarter turn on the table. Do you want me to forgive you, ma'am? I want to know how the boy is. He's at Storrs. He's studying mechanical engineering. He wants to design farm equipment of all things. A small breath of a laugh. He has no idea any of this happened. He thinks I got a scholarship and his surgeon got lucky. Margaret nodded and looked out the window at the turnpike for a while. You asked me a question in the study, she said, whether I wanted to know why you signed it. I said the reason didn't change the document. I remember. I'd like to hear it now if you're willing. So Lily Carter told her about the night of the fever, and the laminated card at the desk, and the man at the lending counter, and the $1,100, and the 19 months. Margaret Blackwell listened to all of it without once interrupting, which was, in its way, the most she had ever given anyone. At the end, she said, I would have done exactly the same thing. I know, said Lily. That's what I was trying to tell you. They did not become friends. That would be too neat, and life is rarely that obliging. But Margaret Blackwell spent the last 6 years of her life doing unglamorous, unphotographed work on the ground floor of the very system she had spent 19 years decorating, and she never chaired anything again, and when she died, she left the bulk of her estate to a foundation whose name did not include hers. Lily Carter finished her degree in 19 months. She was 34 when she walked across a stage in a gymnasium in New Britain and shook a dean's hand, 12 years after she had been 3 months away from doing it the first time. Jaden was in the 4th row. He shouted her name in a way that embarrassed everyone, including him. She repaid the loan in full. It took her 6 years and she made every payment. And when the last one cleared, she framed the statement. She worked on a cardiac floor for 2 years. Good work. Work she loved. And then she left it, because she had figured out what she actually wanted to do, and it was the thing she had needed at 22 and had not been able to find anywhere. The center opened on the ground floor of a converted furniture showroom on Arch Street, 4 blocks from the apartment with the radiator that knocked. It cost nothing to walk in. It still does. What it does is simple, and nobody else was doing it. If you bring in a folder of medical records, someone will sit down with you and go through it, page by page, until you understand what is in it. Not advise you, not treat you. Explain it. If you have an appointment on Thursday, someone will help you write your questions down on Tuesday, in order, on 1 page, so that when the doctor asks whether you have any, you are not standing there with your mind gone blank. If you need a second opinion, someone will show you how to request your own images and reports, which you are entitled to and almost nobody knows it. If there is a financial assistance program you qualify for, someone will find it and help you fill it out and follow up when nobody calls you back. They keep a wall of black composition notebooks by the door, $2 each. You take one on your way out. There is a stamp on the inside cover, in block capitals, that says, ASK, Ethan. Don't assume. Write it down. Ethan Blackwell funded it. He funded it for 11 years and counting, and he never once put his name on the building, and when a reporter asked him about it, he said, "It isn't mine. I pay the electric bill." He is on the board. He attends every meeting. He has never missed one. The last thing I want to tell you happened on a night in November, some years after all of it. Ethan Blackwell had been at a dinner in Hartford and he was driving home, and he came off the highway and went 4 blocks out of his way, the way he did sometimes, and there was a light on in the front window of a converted furniture showroom on Arch Street. He parked. He knocked on the glass. Lily Carter let him in. She was 41 years old. There was gray at her temple that she had stopped covering. On the table in front of her were 3 folders, a laptop, and a black composition notebook, open, covered from margin to margin in small, disciplined handwriting. Ethan looked at the clock on the wall. He smiled. 2 o'clock in the morning, he said. Lily looked at the clock too, and something crossed her face. The whole distance between that library and this room, all of it at once. She closed the book. "This time," she said, "I'm not studying, because I'm afraid of losing someone." Ethan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Then what are you studying for?" Lily Carter looked past him, through the glass door, out at the dark street, at the row of plastic chairs in the front room where, in 5 hours, people would begin arriving with folders under their arms, and that particular expression that she had worn herself, once, in a parking garage in Hartford with her hands on the wheel. "So nobody else has to be as afraid as I was," she said. "There are 2 kinds of help in this world. There is the kind that hands you the money and walks away feeling excellent about itself, and there is the kind that sits down at the table, opens the folder and says, 'Here is what this word means, and here is the question you should ask on Thursday.' The first kind buys a night's relief. The second kind gives a person back their own life to hold." Lily Carter was never trying to become a doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was trying to become the person in the room who knew what to ask, because nobody was going to be that person for her. And if there is anything to carry out of this story, it is this. Somewhere near you tonight, in an apartment with a radiator that knocks, there is a woman at a kitchen table with a folder she does not understand, and an appointment on Thursday. She does not need a miracle. She needs a translator. She needs a notebook. She needs 11 minutes of someone's time. That much most of us can afford.